And we're back. This is the third part of the recording. So we have just installed first recording. We installed the Microsoft SQL Server Express Edition 2016. In the second part, we installed the graphical user interface, the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And in this part, we will configure our Server Management Studio and the server. Okay, we have installed the Management Studio, so let's go find it in our... By the way, you're free to make shortcuts to these on your desktop or whatever. And this is going to be right here under the Microsoft SQL Server Tools 17. Even though we're using 2016, this looks like there's a lot of 2017 stuff in here because we're using the Server Management Studio for 17, and that'll be fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can kind of mix these and match them. And so I'm going to start the Server Management Studio 2017. So this is where we're going to be working mainly. So this is the guy you probably want to pin to the start menu and or create a shortcut on your desktop to him. By the way, if your SQL server is not running, it will tell you at this point. This is a little unusual. I wasn't used to seeing this server authentication. I believe it's going to fail to connect. Let's try it. Yes, it would have connected by now had it been going to. So I'm going to cancel him. And we're going to connect using Windows authentication. Now, there's two ways to connect to an SQL server. You can connect via Windows authentication, where the SQL server is owned by the administrative user on the Windows box, or you can authenticate to the SQL server with a password and a username and password pair. Windows authentication is good only if you can secure the box. But if I let somebody onto this machine, I've essentially let them into my SQL database. So it becomes very important that I secure this machine. I have Windows authentication. Windows authentication basically logs me in with no password or with my Windows password, my Windows credentials, into the database. And this is important that I have this as a way to get into it if I can't. I cannot use Windows authentication from a remote source. So if I just say connect, okay, are we going to run? I'll pause while I troubleshoot this. Okay, if you get an error at this point, go back over to your services. I recommend you pin those to the start menu also, and go over there and check that your Microsoft SQL server, it's under the S's, SQL Server, SQL Express is running. Remember, I had to restart the machine, so since it's manual, it does not come back up as running. So fix that. If it doesn't connect, this is probably the reason, and that's just something we have to put up with if we're in manual mode. Okay, now I'm going to connect to Database Engine. I'm going to connect with Windows authentication, and SQL Express is the name, and I should now connect fairly quickly, and there we are. Okay. Now, this is we have a lot of things here. This is a big GUI control center over here, graphical control center. We're going to go into this guy. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click. So do these tasks in order, please. I'm going to right-click up here. right click, and I'm going to go down to properties. So that's at the very top. I'm going to right click the server. Don't get here. I'm going to right click the server name where it's desktop, right click and go to properties. Under the properties, I want security. Server authentication mode. I need to set this to SQL Server and Windows authentication mode. I'm saying that we're going to log in either way with either Windows or with a username password. And then when I'm done with that, I say okay. So I have to make sure I remember to do that. So then we'll have to restart SQL Server over there. In this is not they do not mean the Server Management Studio. They means that we will have to restart the SQL Server, and that's okay. Let's see. I think I can do that from here. Debug, edit. Yes, restart. Okay, so I right-click the server. This is the server. Right-click, and I'm going to select Restart. So we're restarting the database engine. Now we have restarted it. They weren't talking about this guy. This is the Server Management Studio. The database engine is running under us. Okay, now the next thing, we're going to go down 2 layers down here, and I'm going to open this security under logins, and let's look at what the logins are. The logins that we have are the SA. SA is the system administrator. Notice that his login or her login is disabled. This guy can only log in under Windows. We're going to change that by going to the properties. So I right click and go to the properties. Login name is SA, and let's give him a password. Properties. Somewhere on here is where I enable him to log in. Status, permission to connect, login, change the login to, and so I went to status, changing the login to enabled. This will let us use this system administrator, administrative user. Say okay. Back to the general. Now I have to give him a password. Excuse me. In general, it is not particularly good to use the same password for all of your users, but I'm going to do that here since this is not a production database. And so if I say OK, back to the properties, let's see if I can. Status is enabled, permission to contact, grant, SQL Server authentication. Everything looks fine. Well, that might be just a security feature that we have here where they don't let the system administrator log in remotely. Okay. What we're going to do with this, I'm going to right-click Logins, and I'm going to say a new login. The new login. The login I want you to use is your first initial or first initials, last name, either first initials, last name. You may short, if your name is long and difficult to type, you may shorten it. You may use a nickname. This isn't real important to me. We are going to select SQL Server Authentication. You're going to have to give yourself a password. And make the password match. We're going to leave checked enforce password policy. That means that your password must have uppercase, lowercase, a digit, and a special character, at least 3 out of the 4 of those. Uncheck enforce password expiration. Okay. Now, we will not be able to log in just yet because the default database is still set to something where we can't log in. So for right now, this user will exist. Right now, we are the system administrator, and we have just created a user that you're going to be working with. So my name will be SW Smith, your name will be otherwise. So when you see me logging into as SW Smith, you know to use your own database login there. I'm going to click OK. Notice that the user popped up over here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 databases. I'm going to right-click database. I'm going to say New Database. Okay, I want these database names. I want you to be careful with these database names, please, because if you make a mistake in the database name, it's really going to be a problem later to change it. We're going to create one database. I want you to name that database Scratch, SCRATCH _DB. Scratch DB. Now, Scratch DB will be where we're just going to work with anything we want to work. Anytime we want to create a table, we're going to create it in the Scratch DB. The owner of this database, important, the owner is you. Okay, so you put in your name as the owner. Don't leave it as default. It has to be your name because this is going to be your default database. And you're going to say OK. And there's the database. We're going to right-click it one more time, New Database. This database, I want you to name AP _DB. This is our working database. This is the accounts payable database. Again, the owner of the database is SW Smith, or in your case, it's your database user. So if your name is Tom Jones, it'll be T Jones. I'm not too concerned with this name you created, but it has to be the owner of this database. And I'm going to say OK. I don't know why I'm getting this. Let's start over with that one. Database, new database, AP DB. SW Smith, in my case. Okay. I'm going to pause for a minute. Okay, got that one fixed. The problem I was having was that since I used this same database or the same machine to teach the course last semester, I already had a file named AP _DB. So now when I click the OK, it should work. I say. And notice now that I got that one. So we're going to create two databases. The way we create a database is you right-click, New Database, you give it the database name, but a database will tend to persist even through an installation because it's stored in a place where they try to keep you from losing any data. Okay, one more little thing here. We're going to go back to the security. Remember the login that you created here, the login SW Smith. Remember him? Well, or yours isn't named SW Smith. We're going to go back to his properties for just a moment. Now, his default database. He cannot use the master database. That belongs to the system administrator. So he is going to use ScratchDB. ScratchDB. So that's going to be the default database, excuse me, the default database for the user, your user. My user's name is SW Smith. And I'm going to say OK. And we now, I believe we have it configured. So let's look at what we did. I'm going to go back over it again. We right-clicked, went to Properties of this guy, of the server, down to the security of the server, and we set it to SQL Server and Windows Authentication mode. We said OK. Then we created a new user, the login, and we gave the user your first initial last name. We gave him a password. We are enforcing password policy. We do not enforce password expiration. We could not do the default database at that time, so we had to just say OK. Then we created two new databases. I think we can get to its properties. Anyway, when we created them, basically it was just a matter of I gave them their name and I made this user be their owner. Okay, so SW Smith owns ScratchDB and SW Smith owns AP_DB. Then at the end, we went back to SW Smith properties and we set the default database for SW Smith to be Scratch_DB. I want yours set up like that, please. Make sure that you're set up like that. Now, I don't really care what you name the user. The user can be anything. I'm not going to tell you what your name is. But I do want the databases named ScratchDB and AP_DB. Okay? At this point, we are ready to go back and log in. I'm going to log out of this guy as the system administrator. So notice that I am in as system admin now. I'm going to say disconnect. And now I'm going to say connect. Connect now. I'm going to say SQL Server Authentication. My login name is SW Smith. Your login name is different, of course. Or you may use SW Smith if you want to. My password. You may click Remember Password if you want to. Your choice. I mean, it's your database. And I say connect, and bingo, I am connected. Now, I am connected here as SW Smith. I see my name there. I am not the system administrator, but I am the owner of these two databases. Questions? At this time, I need what did I do with my AP_DB? Did I put it in here? Okay, go find your file, create AP_SQL wherever you put it. Mine is in the folder called Summer 18. And this is a 118 kilobyte SQL file, and you should be able to see it. Okay, I'm going back now to my SQL server. I'm going to go to File, Open, File, or I could have just done Control O, by the way. I'm going to go to this guy, wherever it was you saved him. 2309, mine is saved in summer 2018. There he is. I'm going to open this file. Now let's, before you run this script, create the database AP_DB. Well, we did. We're not going to be working much in the open lab. You pretty much have to have a computer to work here. We will always choose the database we're going to be using. So this one starts out use AP_DB. So all of these objects will be created there. So we're going to create some tables. We're going to create numerous tables. And by the time we get done with this class, you'll be able to read through this and see what all this stuff means. You'll understand what it means later. So basically, I'm ready to rock and roll here. I've got this guy open, and so my file is ready to run. So I've opened him, and I'm ready to click now execute. So here we go, Bing, execute, and notice at the very bottom of him, I have the words query executed successfully. If you get anything else, we need to troubleshoot it. It may be because this got changed, but we select that database. If this database did not get created correctly, if you misname this database, it will cause you an incredible amount of problems. So don't misname the database. The rest of the stuff from now on, we make a mistake, we just go fix it. But if you make a mistake in naming something like the database early on, it is important that you make sure that you get it correct. We can now close this guy. If I close him, I go back to my Object Explorer. Now let's browse around a little bit in here and see what we have. Databases, I have two databases. One of them is AP. Sometimes we'll be doing stuff in Scratch. Pausing for a moment. At the top, we see our databases, AP and Scratch. So under security, I can see the logins. The rest of the stuff we'll look at later. Under server objects. Now let's look under databases first, and remember we were working with AP_DB. If I drop this guy down, I have something here called tables. If I look under tables, I see the name of the tables that I have in there. For example, we're mainly going to be working with invoices and vendors as we go through this. So I have vendors, and this is AP, means accounts payable, and this is some company that deals with people sell them things and then they invoice them. So if I were to go under vendors, I can see the columns that are there. So here's the columns, and you've probably seen a database before. This is a little bit like Access in this case. And just for fun, I'm going to right-click him, and I'm going to select Edit Top 200 Rows. And notice that this is the information that is in there, the vendor ID, the vendor name. So vendor ID 3 or vendor ID 4 is job track, and they're at 1990 Westwood, Los Angeles, California. They have a zip code, a phone number, contact, first name, contact contact last name, contact first name, default terms ID, account number. What else do they have? And other stuff here. So this is just like Access. If I were to get in here and start changing stuff, for example, if I were to type something in here, it would change the data underneath it. But we are not going to be using this very much because this is not a class about using the graphical user interface. But if you want to see the data that are in there and see them fairly easy, you can see them this way. Some of the other things, so this lets me see that I can click on any of this and I can look at the data that are in there. So if I want to see the invoices, edit top 200 rows, and I see the first 200 rows, actually there are only 114 here, of the invoices table. But that's not what this class is about. Okay, that was ITSW 1307. This is a different class. This one is about SQL programming. The other thing that is going to come in handy for us is the database diagrams. And it says that it does not have the support objects to use it. So we're going to say, yes, we'll create the support objects. And I'm going to say a new database diagram. And I'm going to put the invoices and the vendors in the diagram. And this lets me see the, let's see, vendor ID. Lets me see that I have a relationship between the invoices and the vendors by way of the vendor ID in invoices is a foreign key that takes me to the primary key vendor ID. So this gives me some information about the tables. And you're going to become, by the end of the semester, you'll become very familiar with these tables. And we're going to be writing SQL code against these tables. I'm going to go ahead and close this. It asks me if I want to save it. It's just, do you want to save the graphic? The answer here is usually no. I'm going to open a new query. And the first time, anytime I make a query, I'm going to put a comment in the query. I'm going to type my name. Who's doing this? The first executable line of a query is use AP underscore DB, or maybe use Scratch. Now, SQL queries always end with a semicolon, even if the textbook doesn't make you do it. Even if SQL Server doesn't make you do it, a properly written SQL query always ends, SQL statement always ends in a semicolon. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate now a select vendor ID vendor name. When that red line is under it, it means there's some kind of an error there. Let's see what happens when I finish it. From vendors. Let's see if that helps it. One thing I can do is highlight this piece right here and execute. I don't know why. I'm going to execute this. I'm going to execute the query now. Sometimes it just flags them as red. I don't know. It's just being cantankerous. Invalid column name vendor ID, yet the query runs just fine. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have a clue why it's giving me the red lines under it, but it's not an invalid column name. Let's take a look at it. The ones that turn blue are reserved words. Reserved words are typically written in uppercase, and names of fields and things that I use that I make up are written in lowercase. So these are the field names. So select these two field names from vendors. And so you notice I got 122 rows of vendor names here. The vendor ID is pretty close to everything here. That's about all I need to do with this. We have now installed our database. We have tested our database. I think our database is being a little cantankerous with us tonight. I don't know why this query is showing the reds. If it were important to me, I'd worry about it. But, well, I think I'll just go worry about it. I'm going to end the recording there. And I'll get this up on YouTube and out to you as soon as I can. So thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.